President Cyril Ramaphosa says Eskom has managed to avert the worst-case scenario. Writing in his weekly newsletter, the president says the performance of Eskom power stations has been stabilized. Well, he says the power utilities generation fleet continues to show sustained improvement, and the president, however, admits that the power cuts crisis will not be resolved overnight. Let's talk more on this with energy analyst Professor Samson Mamphweli joins me this morning to take our conversation forward. And thank you so much, Prof, for your time, and a very warm good morning to you. I suppose just by reading the president's newsletter and almost giving quite a positive progress report in terms of where they stand with the performance of Eskom's power stations, do you agree with the president? Are we seeing more stabilization from Eskom's part?
Good morning to you and the viewers. Yes, I agree with the president, and he was very careful when he crafted that kind of a letter because he acknowledges that certain things have happened, and he also indicates that the power crisis is not going to be solved overnight. I always go back to the Energy Action Plan and look at the various aspects of the Energy Action Plan, and the Energy Action Plan is divided into various phases. One of the phases is basically the short-term measures, which involves fixing the Eskom generation fleet, especially the coal fleet, to improve the energy availability factor. It also involves other measures such as bringing on board things such as small-scale embedded generation through the rebates program that the Minister of Finance announced. It also involves mid-term measures, which include mid-term and long-term measures, which include bringing new generation capacity through the REAP program and various other programs. And if you look at the president's letter, he touched on some of these aspects. He touched on the fact that Eskom has procured up to 400 megawatts from using the standard offer program. He didn't actually mention the actual program, but he touched on that. He touched on the new generation capacity that's coming from Mozambique, from the hydropower scheme, about 400 megawatts. And I've seen that the National Energy Regulator actually approved the procurement of 1,000 megawatts from Mozambique as well, something that he did not necessarily go into the details, but he touched on that as well. So if you look generally at the president's letter on the energy aspect, he's very much spot on. Most of the mid-term to long-term measures are already starting to be implemented. The removal of the licensing requirements, for instance, has seen the registration of up to 10,000 megawatts of renewable energy. And if you look at the current problem and the root causes, Eskom needs about between 4,000 and 6,000 megawatts. And if you look at all the megawatts that the president has mentioned, collectively, we're sitting in a much better position going forward. But most of those megawatts are not going to come in like tomorrow or today. Some of them will come in the next 18 to 24 months.
Right. Also, he made notice and mentioned, some of the damaged units at the Kusile and Medupi power stations, saying they are being returned to service at an expedited basis. In combination, these units representing more than 3,000 megawatts of capacity. How much of a thorn are some of these damaged units, Prof, especially in, I suppose, the Minister of Electricity's efforts and Eskom's efforts in making sure that they do sustain, generation capacity? But seeing that Medupi and Kusile still have some damaged units, how much of a thorn are they in those efforts?
These are basically some of the biggest problems that led to the current crisis, because if you go back to recent history, Medupi and Kusile were projects that were started in response to the possible shortage of generation capacity, which we are now facing at the moment. And those two projects were supposed to add close to 10,000 megawatts of generation capacity, which is basically base load that is required in the system. So fixing those units is quite important and is part of the energy action plan. The good thing is that if you look at Kusile, for instance, Eskom has got a good plan in terms of fixing the problems there, and we know that by December we will be having close to 3,000 megawatts of generation capacity coming from Kusile, for instance, and that is quite massive if you look at the fact that we need between 4,000 and 6,000 megawatts of generation capacity for us to be able to deal with load shedding, and that should be read in line with the fact that Eskom needs to also deal with other what we call unplanned capacity loss factors, or breakdowns in other power stations that are now sitting at about 15,000 megawatts. The president does indicate in his letter that the breakdowns have improved. They used to hover around 18,000 megawatts, and as things stand, they've been sustained at about 15,000 megawatts, which shows some progress in terms of the work that Eskom is doing in terms of maintenance of the coal fleet. Because the biggest problem has been the fact that when they bring back some of these units, others break down, or sometimes the same units break down, which basically means they need renewal, and Eskom is busy with the renewal program.
As I let you go, Prof, my last question to you, has the worst case scenario being averted, given that obviously there was a warning that during this winter season there would be more demand, obviously, for generation capacity, but in your opinion, have we almost overcome the worst case scenario?
Unfortunately, no. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I rely on numbers and projections. If you look at how we averted the worst case scenario, it was mainly because of partly the maintenance work that was done by Eskom, but largely because the demand did not reach the 34,000 to 35,000 megawatts that Eskom predicted. When that happened, we went to stage 6 load shedding, and that was during that cold front kind of a situation. Now and the other issue was how that demand remained low was because most of the factories had closed down or ramped down their manufacturing. So most of their machines were down for maintenance. The factories normally maintain their machinery during the winter period so that they can avoid the high Eskom tariffs during the cold periods. And now we're moving towards summer, and our expectation is that the demand will rise sharply. We could reach about that 34,000 to 35,000 megawatts when these factories start to ramp up manufacturing around August and September. And that is when the real test of the system will come. And then when we go towards October, things may start to be much better. So unfortunately, we may have gone through the difficult winter period, but the reason why we went through that difficult winter period quite smoothly, it may catch up with us in the next 1 or 2 months. So I'm watching closely what will happen around August and September. And then if we manage to go smoothly through these 2 months, then one can confidently say we've gone through the worst, so things will start to be better towards December, and about May, June next year, if the energy action plan is implemented in a sustainable manner, the way they are doing, load shedding could be a thing of the past.
Well, I appreciate you speaking to us. Prof. Samson Mamphweli, thank you so much for joining me this morning. This at the back of the newsletter that the President released just yesterday, just giving a report on some of the efforts that the Ministry of Electricity is making, but also some of the feedback they have in terms of what they say it's showing good and sustainable progress. But as the Prof said, we might still have a long way to go before, of course, we do celebrate in its rather entirety. But Energy Analyst, Professor Samson Mamphweli, thank you so much for your time this morning.